Today is March 7th, 2023, and it is the 32nd episode of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. Big Ten Report with Joe Mead, 23rd episode of Season 2. We're here a little early this week because the regular season's over, and crazy finish to the Big Ten season with teams, if they won, they would be the 2 seed. If they lost, they'd be the 8 or the 9 seed. So we kind of did say that at the beginning of the year, that it would probably come down to a game or two, but 7 spots over one game, pretty crazy. So I'm your host, Sean Vowles, and today I'm joined by Joe Mead. Joe, we won't do a team of the week this time because there's only one game since we last talked, but a lot of action over the weekend. Where do you want to go first?
I think we should start with the Sunday game. I know we had a game Saturday, but Michigan State beating still a relatively hot Ohio State team, in my opinion, wasn't too noteworthy. Let's start with Penn State defeating Maryland. I texted Sean enough when Maryland had full control of the game. I know this is painful for our Maryland listeners, and I told Sean we're going to look pretty dumb if Maryland continues to dominate this way. And unfortunately for them, they really collapsed in the last 4 minutes. And Sean texted me something, and give him all the credit for this. Maryland was 1-9 on the road in the Big Ten this year, and 10-0 at home. So great on defending your home court. And I understand winning in the Big Ten is really hard on the road. 1-9 is hard to get your head around. What do you think, Sean?
Yeah, and we said it, and they beat Minnesota on the road. The other 9 teams they played, they lost, and I thought they played pretty well in this one, but I think they're starting to be in their head a little bit because they had that game. They're up by 14 at one point, and against a Penn State team that can make threes and come back, but they were never. They got back in that game because Maryland stopped scoring, and I think it's in their head a little bit. Big Ten tournament's a neutral court, but they're as far away as they may have ever. That might be as far away as they've ever played for Maryland this year. I'm looking at their schedule, and their away games are, Wisconsin, Illinois. Like they're going out there again. So there probably won't be many Terrapins fans out there. So I don't think that they're gonna, I don't think there's a whole lot of difference between neutral and road for them. They did win 2 huge games in Connecticut, but that was ages ago, and I'm starting to get worried for Maryland. They're 2 different teams, but Penn State, they were a thought for Mike's team of the week yesterday. He ended up going with the Aggies from Texas A&M, but 2 buzzer beaters by Cameron Winter. What a big weekend for them, Joe. We talked about them over the last couple of weeks. We didn't think they had much of a chance, but as of now, spoiler alert, I think they're in the field. But I'm just really impressed with Penn State. Really like Micah Shrewsbury, and if they could get a couple more talented players over the next few years, they're going to be a pretty good team.
Absolutely. And Sean, I think we should transition to the big elephant in the room, which is our teams,
Yep.
Michigan at Indiana. And again, I promise I'm not going on a tirade, but among a lot of Michigan fans in my inner circle, no one was fully confident, even when we had that 12-point lead, that we were going to win. It just felt like there was going to be one play or one moment. And I have to mention this because someone begged me to bring this up. I think Michigan has given up more and one dunks than any team in the
Oh,
country.
yeah.
And it definitely, a lot took place. I couldn't even tell you, probably on 2 hands, how many times it happened on Sunday. But I was texting Sean during the game, and I was never confident we were going to win. And I don't know what it is, because we're going to talk about all conference teams coming up, but there's a lot of players that are featured on one of the first 3 teams or honorable mentions, 3 of our 5 starters, to be exact. And it's just shocking that we're 1-12 in games decided by 5 points or less, and that's in me and Sean's friendship, I've normally had to comfort Sean when Indiana hasn't made the tournament. I guess the rules are going to be reversed, pulling off a miracle, barring a miracle. But I mean, Sean, you weren't completely happy with Indiana's performance. What didn't excite you about the Hoosiers on
It's
Sunday?
just too much of a roller coaster. I told you that they'd probably throw the first punch and probably be up by 10 in the first half, and they were. I mean, what was it, 27-13? And I was watching it with a couple of my friends, and I'm like, guys, we got to knock him out here. We got to knock him out and be up by 15-20 at halftime. And Michigan, huge run at the end of the first half. I think it was coming, to be honest. They were stuck on 13 for a while. Then they got a couple open shots and they weren't making them. So, I mean, Michigan probably could have punished Indiana even more at the end of that first half. And then they just kept it up. I mean, it was a 14-point deficit to 12-point lead for Michigan. So, it's a 26-point swing. And that was only probably in, like 13 minutes of action? So,
Yeah,
to lose a 13-minute segment at home by 26, that is really bad and really worrying against anybody. But Michigan was desperate. They definitely, I thought they played pretty well, possession to possession over 40 minutes. I think you can say that for the Illinois game too. But I really think it came down to fatigue for the Wolverines. Indiana played Iowa Tuesday, and they were blown out, so their starters didn't play a lot of minutes. And Michigan played 2 days later, 50 minutes on the road. So I think that probably was, scheduling in the Big Ten. They're spreading out the games for TV. It happens. And this game also went to overtime, too. And you look at Michigan, really 6 players played. And Indiana wasn't much different. 8 players got over 10 minutes. But it's really 6 and 6 in the end. And that's not a great sign, I don't think, for either of our teams. Because, it's hard to win when you have 6 or 7 players that you can turn to. But this team this year for Indiana, difference from old years, they probably wouldn't have won that game, and they really can. Really, both Michigan games are a great example of why the Hoosiers are different this year. They just win games when they don't have it, and you gotta be able to do that to win. To win a Big Ten tournament, you gotta win 3 or 4 games. To win a national championship, you gotta win 6. You're not gonna play well in all 6. It's just not gonna happen. But great game from Trace and Race Thompson. I know he missed those 4 free throws at the end, which almost made me throw something. But 16 and 10 in his last game at Assembly Hall. So you got to cross the line. You got that win, and it seems like the first time in forever that the Big Ten tournament doesn't really matter for the Hoosiers, and it's relieving that we don't actually have to win this game, which is pretty nice. But Michigan, though, you're going to need to do a lot of work in the Big Ten tournament. But we'll talk about bracketology later. But if you have anything to add, go ahead, or we'll move to the next one.
yeah, I could I'll add and finish this segment. We'll go on to the next. But yeah, Michigan, it's funny. Sean said Indiana teams of the past would not have won that game. Michigan teams of the past would have won that game. So the roles are reversed completely. When I said it at the beginning of the episode that roles are reversed, rules are literally in almost every way reversed. So, yeah, no more ranting needs to be done on that. That could be saved for later on. Sean, do you want to talk about Purdue, Illinois quickly before we transition to the road teams, 3 road teams that won on Sunday?
Yeah, this was probably the game that probably meant the least for tournament standings and for seeding in the NCAA tournament and stuff like that. Purdue senior night, I turned it off and had to turn it back on. It's probably the 10th time that I've had to do that to a Big Ten game this year. I watched the first half, and Purdue, they clocked them. I think they're up by 19 at halftime, and they were like, wow, like, oh, Purdue's back. Good for them. Like, this makes Indiana look a little better and makes the Big Ten look better because Purdue was the elite team. And then, Illinois, did they tie it? Did they come all the way back to tie it?
They tied it,
they
yes,
did?
in the last 3 minutes.
Yeah, so that was right as I turned it back on, and obviously Purdue got across the line. Brandon Newman, huge game, which is big for them. I think this might be time for Painter to give Newman a little bit more control because the freshmen have really started to play pretty poorly. I know Braden Smith had 15. He made a couple threes, but Lawyer's dealing with an injury, I think. Or that's what the reports are. He's still playing, though. But, probably Zach Edey's worst game of the season, and they still won. And I thought Illinois played pretty well, too. Obviously, they had to come back. And I think both teams will be liking their chances to win some games in the Big Ten tournament. Not that it really matters for either team, I don't think. I think the committee's probably already got them on the bracket, and they're not going to move them. Maybe Purdue either in that 4th or 5th spot, but I think Illinois is probably a 7 seed. And if they run the table, I don't see that changing. But, yeah, I think Purdue, they had a good half, and if they turn that first half into a full game, they're right back to where they were at the beginning of the year, I think.
Yeah, and to finish up on that, I'll finish on both teams. Illinois, we've harped on them for not being a consistent team, and they also did not have Epps in this game, the second straight game. So I guess you need to get him healthy for the Big Ten tournament and for the bigger picture of March Madness. But Illinois, that segment where you fell behind, that obviously has to go. And then conversely for Purdue, similar to Indiana, what we touched on, going on a stretch like that at home where you let the other team claw back like that, that's one. I'm not trying to make you so fearful of the tournament, but that's
Can't
one
happen.
thing that you should keep an eye on.
Can
Yeah.
happen. I know you're not going to be at home in the tournament, but if you have a 20-point lead at home, that should be a 20, at least a 15-point win. I'll give you 5 points, but yeah. Think things to worry about for both teams, things to be pretty happy about for both teams. I think Illinois has actually been playing pretty well here recently, maybe other than the Ohio State game. Going back to the Indiana game, I thought they gave a really good effort. They won against Minnesota on short rest because of COVID. So then they came back against Northwestern. They lost at Ohio State, but then they won at home to a really, really desperate Michigan team. And they gave a good effort at Mackey. Like, these are probably the results that you're okay with. And then big one for them in the tournament. We'll talk about it later when we get back. But you sort of teased it earlier, Joe. 3 road teams won the 3 late games. And I'll let you start with Nebraska, Iowa. I was pretty shocked with what happened here.
Yeah, it was funny. Iowa was my team of the week last week, and I'm not gonna say I thought Nebraska would win it all because that would be a flat out lie. I looked at the possibility of it because they have been the I don't want to say spoiler or season ruiner because Penn State's fine now after they lost to them, but and maybe to Wisconsin they are. But point being, Nebraska in that 11-14 game, if they get out of that, we'll get into this in our preview. Man, I do not want to play them if I'm any
Yeah.
on that
Yeah.
side of the bracket. They're just offensively, it's nothing even. I can't even say it's some complex offensive system. When they make shots, they're just so frustrating to play against. And it feels like, once you claw back in the game, they hit one to break your back again. And, I think Fred Hoiberg has definitely earned himself a fifth year in Lincoln, especially with COVID and everything. And he's a heck of a coach. If you look at his track record at Iowa State, I know the NBA, whatever, who cares? But, maybe next year this is something you could build off. And are they going to win 5 games in 5 days? No, but is this encouraging? And maybe could you get into a postseason tournament like the NIT playing like this? Not an NIT selection expert, but
Neither am
find
I.
ways to build.
Yeah, I think they will get it. Like you said, they've got the 14. They've got Minnesota in the first game
Yeah,
tomorrow night. So I think Hummel mentioned it on the broadcast. Actually, them not being a team with a bye might be good for them because if they get to, let's say they beat Minnesota 17-15, then you lose to Maryland. I think you're in the NIT unless all these 1 seeds in these mid majors lose. Because if you win your regular season title, you have an automatic bid to the NIT. So a couple of 1 seeds have lost already. Like we saw Hofstra lose yesterday in the Colonial. They'll be in the NIT, but Nebraska 6-2 over their last 8 games, and they had a shot against Michigan State too. So, you know, the path Nebraska could go on could meet up with Indiana, and I don't know who I'd rather play. I'd probably rather play Maryland, to be honest, because they haven't been able to do anything outside their home floor since November. But yeah, it just seemed like that whole time that Iowa was gonna win, but Nebraska kept it at like 3, and then they got it to 1, and they're like, wait, Nebraska's just not gonna stop making shots. And Sam Hoiberg is like a big player for them. Griesel, just really solid. And Iowa, game probably doesn't mean a whole lot to Iowa. I know they didn't get a double bye, but they might have not really mattered. I know it's senior night and stuff like that, but I was shocked at that game. Then the next one will go to the Jersey Mike's Arena, Northwestern going in there and really punching Rutgers in the face. Rutgers has completely fallen off. Anything to say on the Scarlet Knights?
yeah. I don't have much more to add. I would just say I don't know where that team in from January and the very early part of this month went. I don't know. I can't just attribute it to the injury of Mawot Mag. I don't know what it is. I don't know if they could figure it out or. I think what's going to come down to is, and I texted Sean this, and we'll preview this later. Rutgers is not a team that I feel once they get behind in the second half that they're coming back. I know they did it a few times at home, but not only on a neutral or the road has that proven to be an issue, but they don't seem to like have a sense of urgency. They were down 10 to us, or they've been down like in this game. They weren't really like rushing. They were kind of playing their game and I guess stick to a system, stick to your identity. But I just find that pretty insane.
Yeah, it was hard to watch, to be honest. They had no, like, if Cam Spencer doesn't make a lot of shots, then they're going to lose. It's kind of what it is. And they've lost like 4 home games in a row. Let me check that to make sure it's true. 1, 2. All right, so 3 home games in a row. But still, they have a win at Wisconsin and a win at Penn State on the road in that stretch. But, man, Northwestern, I mean, they played solid, but I don't think they did anything out of the ordinary for them. And Rutgers already beat them there. But, the crowd wanted to give them something to cheer for. They just didn't. I think Paul Mulcahy's really struggling. His shot looks way off. And, like you said, if you lose like a guy who's probably your 5th best starter, who can play defense and is not really an offensive weapon, like you can't possibly fall this much. But they're falling fast. They're 18-13. And they've got a pretty intriguing first round matchup in the Big Ten tournament. Last game on Sunday, Joe, was probably the worst basketball game that I've watched in a while. Wisconsin survives at the barn and stays alive in the Big Ten tournament. For the NCAA tournament, not the Big Ten tournament, but Wisconsin too. I mean, this tomorrow in the Big Ten tournament is going to be a great example of why you shouldn't watch this conference, probably. But Wisconsin beat Minnesota. They got across the line, a couple big shots down the stretch. But man, what a rough game from the Badgers. I know they won, but
Oh my god, I would say cringy is the word. That's the word I would use because at the end when Wisconsin was celebrating, yes, I know you won a road game, but come on, really? I mean, the song "Staying Alive." We're gonna touch on this later. Song "Staying Alive" is how I figure the Wisconsin season is because they were down 7 at the half. They were down. They were like getting the lead back, giving it back to Minnesota toward the end of the game, and all I could think was, man, this does not look like a team playing for its season because had they lost that game, that's probably their season because I don't see them winning 3 in a row. I don't have to save that for the end of this episode for anyone to yell and scream and disagree with me. But yeah, I understand good games from Crowell and Wall, but their bench, 0 points from the bench and 3 of 12 from 3, and more importantly off the bench, Jordan Davis, and I'm not blaming their issues on Sunday on him at all, but he's a difference maker when he comes in and makes threes. It just boosts their offense. And, the way they play the game when they hit threes, that's the only way I see them making a run or even doing damage. But I'll save the rest on Wisconsin for later on in this episode, Sean.
yeah, I think Wisconsin might be a little bit like Rutgers. They just played, I guess, pretty solid early in the year, and now they're coming back to earth. But you look at, they have maybe they go 5 players pretty much. Obviously, they went 4 players off the bench, got all less than 10 minutes. Lindsey got 13, but I mean, if you're looking at this team, where are you going to get consistent scoring? Crowell is not a post-up big guy against a true 5. I don't really think that Minnesota has one. I guess Dawson Garcia is their 5, but he's really like a 6'9", probably like a 4. And then Tyler Wall is an undersized 4 who's a really good defender, but not somebody you can just dump the ball down to. And then Essegian, super streaky shooter. Hepburn has really been up and down. He's been injured here and there. He can go pretty cold. And then Klesmit, and then that's their team pretty much. A couple of these guys off the bench. Carter Gilmore, not really a threat. Jordan Davis, not a threat recently. So too much has to go right for Wisconsin. If they fall down by 10, I don't see them coming back. Kind of like Rutgers. Maybe that's why Rutgers got them, because neither team could score. But
It's kind of a mirror image.
yeah, I was disappointed with Wisconsin, and I'll talk about where I have them later. But that's it for the weekend. So we're gonna go into our picks for all conference first. Joe, I've got your team up here first, so I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, so my first team, me and Sean didn't have too many disagreements. Our first team was Trace Jackson Davis, Zach Edey, Chris Murray, Boo Buie, and then my one disagreement was TJ Shannon. I think I look at it more in terms of value to their team. I think Shannon wasn't out too many games for Illinois, so you didn't really see this. But man, that guy is such a difference maker, and maybe this is just the reality Michigan fan and the reality where you have Terrence Shannon, where we're a lot better and maybe win the conference. But no, seriously, he is phenomenal. And I think as a pure athlete, I know every D1 athlete, especially the Big Ten, is phenomenal. But he's one of the more athletic players I've ever seen. And his defense, he really upped his scoring from when he was at Texas Tech. I really think he could be the difference maker for Illinois. If the story's written that they finally broke their Sweet 16 curse, it would be mainly because of him. But Sean, do you want to go to your first team, or should I do my second team and then Coach of the Years?
They're both of your teams are up there now, so you could just go through your second teams, or you can go through your second teamers,
team.
and then I'll do the disagreements.
Yeah, second team, I had Hunter Dickinson, Jameer Young, Chase Audige, Tyson Walker, and Jalen Hood-Schifino. So I'll highlight Tyson Walker and Jameer Young because that's probably where a lot of the disagreement might be. I think Tyson Walker, toward the end, really earned his place on my second team all-conference. I think he's such a value to Michigan State because he could bail them out of so many bad situations. Sean knows this more than anyone as an Indiana fan. And his shot clock threes are the most frustrating thing in all of college basketball. And Tyson Walker may hold the record for them, especially
He's probably
tough
the
shots.
best. He's probably the best at them. Just I'm not pulling that out of it. I haven't seen any stats, but he seems like he's got that under control by a lot, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And then for Jameer Young for Maryland, I think without him, Maryland, let alone a tournament team, I don't know if they're 500. I think the first year under Kevin Willard looks a lot different with Jameer Young not on the floor, just scoring. He does rebound. He gets in there, 6'1", but gets in there a lot and moves the ball around. Averages only 4 assists a game, which I think is unfair because if you watch Maryland play, they play through him. And I think phenomenal player. And then I'll go to my Coach of the Years real quick. This is, I know, no Matt Painter on mine, which very shocking to some people. Despite Maryland's 1-9 road record, I will give Kevin Willard a mulligan because going 10-0 at home is extremely impressive. I think they're the only team in the conference, Sean, to do that, right?
Yep.
Only team in the conference. So defending your home court and then inheriting the program he did, which wasn't bad under Mark Turgeon by any means. It was probably a top 20, 25 program nationally under Mark Turgeon. But coming off the year they did last year with a lot of new pieces, a lot of uncertainty, I don't think a lot of people had Maryland in the tournament, let alone being a probably top 6, 7 seed in the tournament, or number 6, number 7 seed in the tournament. So really impressed with him. And then Chris Collins second. Northwestern's always been a team where fans have gone, yeah, or the media's gone, yeah, with the experience they have, maybe. But this was a year where they really proved it. And I think this is the best Northwestern team probably ever, considering they've only had one tournament team.
Yeah.
And I'll give my justification for Painter real quickly. I think Matt Painter is still a heck of a coach. This is nothing on Matt Painter. No hate toward him at all. Really likable guy, in my opinion. But Purdue toward the end started to fade off. And I think winning the Big Ten regular season is something we've seen him do. So is it unfair to give him a higher expectation? I don't know. That's really not up to me. But that's kind of been the norm at Purdue of late, where every 2-3 years, Purdue's probably going to hang a Big Ten regular season banner. So with that, I'll give the floor to Sean.
Yeah, so I went with Collins for my Coach of the Year. I think he'll probably get it. I don't know if it's been announced yet. But losing two of your better players to Duke and Carolina, off last year's team that wasn't good anyway, and coming back and coming second in the Big Ten, really impressive. People had kind of written him off as a coach, that this would be his last year. We've seen it at Pitt too. I mean, that's why you let these guys go to the end of their contracts sometimes. You don't really want to buy them out, and him and Capel are going to be back. Two Duke guys are going to be back next year. So, excellent job for Collins. Predicted, I think, 12th in the conference. Great year for them. A whole lot of good road wins. I know they weren't so great at home, but second place in the conference. So good for them. I went with Painter's second team. I think if you win the conference and you're predicted to finish 8th, I know they didn't play well down the stretch, but that's why I went with there. But Willard, too, really good, especially after they had hit it big in November, and then they came really far back down to earth in December and January, and then he righted the ship, won home games, and got them back into a pretty good position. So he deserves a lot of credit, too. I mean, you can see up there, my one disagreement is Jalen Pickett being on the first team. I think that his ability to really just run the offense is pretty unique. And he's a 6'4" guy who shoots a couple threes, but really just posts up and passes at incredible rates. So, yeah, he was actually in the MAC at Siena before, so seen him a couple times in person playing Fairfield. That wasn't fun. But I have Shannon in the second team, and then my only other addition to the second team is one of your guys, Joe, Jet Howard. His ability to score, I think, really, really helps Michigan, and I know that you might be a better team with him off the floor, but from an individual point of view, he's probably not going to be in the Big Ten next year. He's going to be in the NBA. So those are my teams. You can see them up there. They're the same. The spots that I didn't mention were the same as Joe. So I think we'll go right to the Big Ten tournament bracket, Joe. It's up there on the screen now. We kind of already talked about Wednesday's games, but any matchups come to mind as big ones right off the bat?
Yeah, so I think probably with Wednesday and Thursday, we could probably lead us into bracketology, right, Sean?
Sure.
Bracketology questions. Okay, so I asked this last week, but a lot's happened in college basketball, and a lot more will probably happen between the filming of this and Wednesday's game at 6:30 Eastern time, 5:30 local. So, is Wisconsin in a do or die game for their NCAA tournament hopes against Ohio State?
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't have them in the field right now. I'll send you, or no, I have it up on the screen. I'll send it
Perfect.
to you here in a second. But yeah, I actually have them as my first team out right now. So they absolutely need that game, and they might need another one, depending on what happens around them. Maybe you could say that it's a good thing that they have to play an extra game so they can get another win, but you've said this before, Joe. The most dangerous teams are the ones with nothing to lose, and that's exactly Ohio State right now. And Ohio State's ability to score might cause Wisconsin a couple issues because they aren't able to score themselves, too. So, yes, they absolutely have to win. They might have to beat Iowa, too.
Okay, that took my second question away. All right. Is there any way, from a Nebraska fan, that we could go to the Big Ten championship game and lose and flirt with the bubble?
I don't think so.
Sean.
No.
Yeah.
No. Let me just look. I don't even do their numbers, so
Yeah, because
let's
I mean,
see.
I couldn't even answer that question off the bat because I think they have some quad 1 wins, but they have some quad 3 and 4 losses
So
somewhere in there.
they're
too.
93rd in KenPom, which is pretty bad, and
Yeah.
then in the hundreds in the net. So no, I don't think so. They would have to
Okay.
get the automatic bid.
All right. So with that, we'll get into some more bubble teams or teams that maybe are safely in. So one of these teams that might be safely in right now is Penn State. Is there any way losing to Illinois by a lot? I don't think that. Losing to Illinois will detract us, take us out of the tournament. Bad wording.
Maybe, but you've already beaten them twice, so I don't know if you can really take much away from losing. You still beat them 2 out of 3 times. Trying to think here. Penn State is my 4th to last team in. So I do have them in the first four, as you can see there, but they are the safest of the teams in that. I really don't think that it's in their control, unless of course they win 2 games and they kind of take it out of the committee's hands and definitely have them in. But no, if there's no bid stealers and there's no crazy runs by teams that are well outside the bracket right now, like a North Carolina or Michigan, I do think that Penn State will be safe. They might get thrown in Dayton, but maybe not. Especially if Michigan beats Rutgers, I think Penn State's probably not even in the first four, regardless of what happens to Illinois.
All right, that's funny. That leads us to our next question from Rutgers, probably New Jersey native. I won't read the curse word, but if fill in the blank really goes south and we lose to Michigan, do we have to sweat out Selection Sunday?
Yeah, I think you do. 18-14. That's not. That's something that is, I guess you were 10-10 in the Big Ten, but yeah, I would. I'm not really sure what a team like what would they do with a team like Rutgers with three losses. They are 5-6 in quad one though, which is really good. I would think that you're probably okay if you lose to Michigan, especially because Michigan is playing pretty well right now. But I would say you're okay, but don't quote me on that. You're still going to be sweating it out. Probably be thrown in Dayton if you lose.
All right, and then our last team on the bubble, my Michigan Wolverines. With a win on Thursday, Friday obviously becomes a must win. However, does Saturday also become a must win if you advance to Friday?
That's a tough one. I think you need 2 to even get back in the conversation. Right? So you need 2 wins. You need to beat Rutgers, and you don't want to overlook teams very often, but they're not. Michigan should be able to win that one, probably by a lot. I don't see Rutgers being able to hang with Michigan. You make a couple shots, and I think that's probably a 10-point win. I know it's an odd game. It's the dreaded 8-9 game. It is at noon this year because the tournament's in the Central Time Zone, not 11:30, which is great. So it's at noon Eastern Time, and hopefully you'll get that one. And then Purdue, still the best team in the conference with all the best numbers, still on the 1 line, as you can see on the YouTube. They're my 4th number 1 seed. You definitely need that one, and then I would say you better chance than not that that's enough to make it.
Okay, great. And then I think we could probably end it with a question about Purdue. If Purdue won and dones, are they gone from the 1 seed line?
I don't know. I keep thinking that I want to put UCLA first, or I want to put UCLA on the 1 line, but I really just can't. I mean, they haven't played anywhere near the type of schedule that Purdue has, and Purdue just has 1 more loss, or 2 more losses on the year. Trying to remember. Does Purdue have 5 or 6 losses? Purdue has 5 losses. So, I don't see it. Unless, I would say the only way that Purdue's not a 1 seed is if they lose to Michigan and UCLA beats Arizona again in the Pac-12 tournament. Because UCLA, they don't have the wins against tournament teams. They're 7-4 in quad 1, but a lot of these games aren't even against tournament teams like Oregon. And, they lost to both Illinois and Baylor in Vegas early in the year. But if you think of wins against the field, they do have a 27-point win at Maryland, the only team to win there this year. That's pretty important. But other than that, they have a win against Kentucky, 1 win against Arizona, and did they not play USC twice? Doesn't look like they did. And then 1 win against Arizona State. So they have 4 wins against tournament teams. So I don't think that you can really penalize them for that. Or I don't think you can penalize Purdue for having 1 more loss and so many more good wins. Because at the end of the day, they're supposed to value every game equally. So I think Purdue's probably okay, unless UCLA wins the Pac-12, beats Arizona again, and Purdue loses in the first game.
Okay, great. So with that, Sean, do you want to make predictions about Wednesday and then transition it into Thursday before we preview those games?
Yeah, sure. So the viewers on YouTube can see the bracket. It's up there. I think Wisconsin and Nebraska are easily going to win on Wednesday, or maybe not easily, but they should win on Wednesday. Wisconsin might easily win by 6 if they control the entire game, but I don't think. I think Nebraska wants to play in the NIT. I think they'll win that, and then Wisconsin backs to the wall. I think they'll win too.
Backs to the wall. Hopefully that wasn't an attempt to be funny with Tyler Wall. I'm just kidding. But
Oh, jeez, I forgot.
the one strong disagreement I would have is I actually believe Ohio State's going to beat Wisconsin, and
Yeah.
I think what it's going to come down to is, and this will be touched on a little later. I think if Ohio State in the first half gets out to a lead of 10 or more, that's the magic number we've talked about with Wisconsin and Rutgers. I think Wisconsin better pack their bags for the NIT. Well, not pack their bags, better get comfy for the NIT in Madison, because Ohio State, I know they didn't win at Michigan State. They had a little spurt where Michigan State dominated them, but they've been playing probably, I don't want to say their best basketball, because at the beginning of the season they were a completely different team, but they've been playing a heck of a lot better basketball over this past probably last 2-3 weeks. And I think Chris Holtman's probably going to draw something up. I don't think you're going to have the scoring problems they had against Wisconsin when they played them at Value City very early in February. So I'm actually going to take the Buckeyes in that one. And I think the Buckeyes get out to a big lead in the first half. I think Wisconsin chips away at it, but Ohio State, when they're hot, I think is one of the better teams in the conference. Just purely talking every team at their hottest. I think Ohio State could be 5-6. They're a talented team. Don't write them off.
Okay, so we'll go through the bracketiers if the teams that we predicted to win won. Might be a little bit hard to track, but we'll try our best to.
Yeah. Try our best, listeners.
Ohio State moves on for Joe. Wisconsin moves on for me, and Nebraska, I'm assuming, for you too, Joe.
For both, yes.
Yeah, I think they'll handle Minnesota, actually. I really am looking forward to that game. It's the later one. I don't think there's any other important games in the other conferences on, so I'll probably be watching that one, but we'll go to Thursday, Joe, the dreaded 8-9 game. Michigan-Rutgers. Michigan already won at Rutgers. Did they play at the Chrysler Center?
They did not, thankfully.
Did not? Okay, but I think Michigan is playing pretty well despite losing down the stretch, and I think Michigan has a real chance to get a big win here, and I think they'll move on to Purdue. And Rutgers will be sweating it out on Selection Sunday.
Yeah, I can't disagree with much, and I'll just mention this for our Michigan listeners. This is the 8th time in 10 conference tournaments we've been in not the 8-9 game, but the noon game, because we've won the conference a few times in that, 2 times in that span. But yeah, I can't think of a better game to put on at noon on a Thursday when most people are at class or at work, because God, what an stylistically not a very intriguing game of basketball, in my opinion. And Sean touched on this, so we'll end with this. Michigan, if you take the results out of it, which sounds really stupid, but they've been playing very well, and Rutgers, and you could consider the results with Rutgers, has been not playing well. So talk about a tale of 2 different friends, and Sean and I agree we're going to pick Michigan. So the next game we'll preview is our 12-13. So Sean, for Wisconsin, for Sean, Wisconsin, and for me, Ohio State playing Iowa. Sean, what do you think?
I think Iowa's mad about their loss to Nebraska on senior night, and I think they're going to, if it ends up being Wisconsin, I think it's going to be ugly. I think Ohio State might be able to hang with them, but since I picked Wisconsin, I'm going to go 20-plus point victory for the Hawkeyes.
Okay, so this is going to be my my boldest take probably I've ever done on this podcast, because we've had some bold ones, but a lot of them have come true. Not to toot our horn too much, but I'm going to go with the Buckeyes upsetting the Hawkeyes. Little Wednesday to Friday Cinderella run. I really think Iowa, I'm really baking on Iowa not shooting as well as they usually have the past month. I said in last episode, logic would tell you can't shoot like that all the time. Would you agree, Sean?
Yeah, but They also get a lot of layups too, and you can make
They do.
layups all the time. So I just think I could see Ohio State kind of going on a run. Chris Holman then going to Notre Dame after the season too. That's a long-term episode that we'll probably talk about him after the season. But yeah, Ohio State could do it. They're really talented, like you said, and they when if they win the night before, I think I was gonna like that, and that doesn't usually work out for teams well. But we'll go on to Penn State, Illinois, round 3. Both teams coming in. Penn State off of 2 buzzer beaters, and Illinois coming off a tough loss at Mackey. I think everybody's okay for Illinois. Epps should be back, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm going to go with the Fighting Illini to move on to the next round.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the Fighting Illini. I'm not gonna go into anything stylistically. I just think there's two trends that I don't ever ignore in basketball. I think it's really hard to beat a good team 3 times. And to be fair to Penn State fans, I know in recent memory you beat in Holtman's first year at Ohio State, you beat a 2 seed Ohio State 3 times at the Garden. Remember that game, Sean?
I
It was
don't,
Tony.
but I do remember the Garden year. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. But getting back to
that
our
was the
main
year. It
point,
was a week early.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. But getting back to our main point, I think Penn State has had a really good year, and I think this will be of the guaranteed matchups between Rutgers, Michigan, and Penn State, Illinois. This is probably going to be one of the two. I'd much rather watch Penn State, Illinois than even my own team play Rutgers. But regardless, I think Illinois does not lose to Penn State 3 times. I think they're too talented. I think logic tells you they have to find some consistency with the veterans they have on that team and the talent they have on that team. So I'm going to go with the Fighting Illini, especially with the home crowd.
yeah. I think
I'll go with that.
it turned out well for the Big Ten. That's the I think it's 6:30 Eastern time,
Yeah.
5:30 Central time game. So that's the premier game, and I think they'll set up an all Illinois matchup in the Big Ten tournament. That's in Illinois in the next round, but Maryland, Nebraska, the nightcap on Thursday. Maryland can't play on the road. Nebraska's getting hot. I think this is a really close to a toss up, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
Like the Maryland, like just kind of bullies teams sometimes, and Jameer Young can get a basket, but really, other than that, their offense is just post ups for Hart and Scott and Reese. So I don't really know. I really don't know who I would want to face because the winner is facing the Hoosiers. I don't. I'm not so sure that I'd want to face Nebraska. I mean, Indiana played them. I think it was the second Big Ten game of the year. They didn't have Sam Griesel, so IU had an easy time. But I've said this a couple times. I am happy that we got him then, and we haven't had him since. So why not? I'm gonna go with the Cornhuskers, solidifying their spot in the NIT with a win over Maryland.
Okay. I'm going to go against all logic we've used in this episode regarding Maryland. I'm going to pick Maryland to beat Nebraska in a excruciatingly, I put the emphasis on excruciatingly close game to end Thursday. I think that game will probably start at what, Sean? Probably 9 Eastern time, 8 Central. That game might go to 11:30 Eastern time with all the timeouts.
Yeah.
Nebraska, I think, is going to give them a heck of an effort. I think Maryland, at the end of the day, they still have veterans on that team. I know they're relatively new together, but I think some competitive fire comes alive with Maryland. We've seen Kevin Willard at times keep a cool head, but he can get fiery, and maybe this is the game where it gets him fired. I think Maryland wins a very close game, Sean, but that's for our listeners, that's as unconfident. I'm more confident about Ohio State going to Friday than I am in that pick. It's a very tough pick for me.
Yeah, so they faced once this year in Lincoln, I believe, and that
Mhm.
was a win for the Cornhuskers by 4 in overtime. So, yeah, Maryland didn't shoot it very well, and neither did Nebraska, and they still won. So, you have Maryland, I got Nebraska. Back to the top of the bracket for Friday, we got Purdue and Michigan. This is Purdue looked pretty good for parts of the game against Illinois, like we said, but Michigan playing with their backs against the wall too. This is a pretty interesting one. I'll let you start this one off because I know who I'm gonna pick.
Yeah, well, all right. This is the episode where I'm going to make Sean really mad. This game reminds me of the 2016 game against Indiana in the Big Ten tournament, where Indiana had won the regular season, was the number one seed, and Michigan was the eighth seed, and needed a win. Literally needed that game just to get to Dayton on the first four in 2016. And Cam Chapman, who really did nothing else at Michigan but throw balls in the ocean, uh, hit the game winner
After traveling.
after traveling and after getting some favorable calls. Admittedly, I'm mature enough to admit that. But
That Indiana didn't care about that game, and Michigan needed it, so I don't mind.
yeah, so with that, I'm not saying that's why I'm going to pick Michigan. I'm going to pick Michigan because I'm going to bank on them getting a lead on Purdue, and Michigan, who's been consistently terrible at keeping leads in late games against teams that are very good, i.e., Indiana and Illinois this past week. I'm going to bank on the fact that Purdue's inability to catch up is stronger than Michigan's ability to, for lack of a better term, blow games late, right? So I'm going to go Michigan with their backs against the wall. Hunter Dickinson potentially playing his last meaningful game as a Wolverine. I know he can come back with NIL. We'll touch it at the offseason, but I'm going to go with Michigan. I'm going to say I'm going to ride with it. That might be homerism, but I can't see how a Michigan team this talented does not make March Madness. I have to see it to believe it, and that might be delusion. But I'm going to pick Michigan in another very close game.
I was gonna pick the Wolverines too. I think Michigan needs to get out there and play again. Two tough losses. They were right there. If you win against Rutgers the day before, I think that momentum swings right into Purdue. I'm gonna say it too. I'm gonna go with the Wolverines. Listeners might I believe did Michigan as an 8 seed beat Purdue as a 1 before?
Yes, in the
Yeah.
2017 tournament.
Yeah,
We were
so
on the phone during that game, and yeah, I remember that. I'll never forget that.
yeah, so that happened once. I think it happens again. I think Kobe Buffkin can really win the guard battle for the Michigan, and that's how you have to beat Purdue, right? You have to win against their guards, and I think Michigan is very capable of that. And Hunter Dickinson is probably the second biggest player in the Big Ten, other than Edey. So if there's anybody that can make it tough for him, he can. So they played once. I think it ended, was it 5, but it wasn't really that close.
It wasn't that close.
Yeah.
Purdue went on a run in the first half, and from there, Michigan couldn't catch up. So I think, and Jet Howard was out that game, but I don't know if that was a good or bad thing, depending on context. But, I'll end on this for Michigan Purdue. I see this going one of two ways. If it's close, Michigan wins. And if it's a blowout, it'll be Purdue absolutely lighting up Michigan, hitting threes. If we don't eat, they'll hit threes. So, I see it going one of two ways. We either win close or Purdue wins. It'll be by 10 or more. I'll say that much.
Yeah, I think it comes down to can Juwan Howard make it about the guards like we saw with Indiana. Woodson said to Hood Schifino, "You're going to win me this game." It's exactly what he did. Buffkin on the ball screen, you make that happen, I think you get it. You get a good chance to win. Purdue can't really cover that, and Buffkin's proven pretty good at that mid-range pull-up. Probably second best in the Big Ten, or even the best, depending on who you want. So I could see it happening, and Michigan's going to need it for sure. They can't overlook Rutgers, but you got a chance. So we'll go on to the next round right at 30 minutes after the conclusion of that one. For me, it'll be Iowa against Michigan State, and for Joe, it'll be Ohio State against Michigan State. I'm going to go with the Hawkeyes again. I don't think they're going to have much trouble with Wisconsin, so I think Iowa is going back to the semifinals. I think they're going to put two good performances 2 days in a row together after losing to Nebraska on Senior Day, and they got away with one against Michigan State last time, but they ended up winning. So I'm going to say it happens again. So I'm going to have Michigan and Iowa in my last 4 on the top part of the bracket.
Okay, and with that, we'll have Michigan State and Ohio State in 4. You know what? I'll also say Michigan State, Iowa, because either one of those matchups, I'm going to pick Michigan State. I think this team has turned a corner. Uh, I think even the biggest Iowa fan would agree they got extremely lucky to beat Michigan State uh, in the game they played a week ago. And had they played that game again on a neutral court, I don't know what the result would be. But I will say this: I'm going to bet on the veteran backcourt of Michigan State, and I've been pretty repetitive in saying that the best Tom Izzo teams in March have a veteran backcourt. And I think with Walker and Bogard, I think they guide them through this game. I think whether it's against Ohio State or Iowa, those are both teams defensively that leave a lot to be desired. So I'm going to go with the Spartans, and I'm going to go with the Spartans actually winning this game probably by 8 to 10. I think they'll have control, and with 5 minutes left of the game, it'll be pretty obvious that Michigan State's going to win the game. So I have them. So our semifinal, Sean, we have a disagreement. Then I have Michigan State playing Michigan in the first semifinal, and then Sean has my Wolverines against Iowa. But before we preview that, let's preview the all, hopefully for our sake, knock on wood, the all Illinois final. All Illinois Friday game in the Big Ten tournament between Illinois and Northwestern. Sean, what do you think?
This is a tough one because they've played once, I think. Let me check that quickly. Illinois
Twice they split.
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
They split. Okay, so
Yeah.
that makes. I would think Illinois would have a much bigger fan presence there. So I'm gonna go with the Fighting Illini, kind of rolling off of the win against Penn State, right into Northwestern. I think Shannon could really mess things up for their guards, and then Meyer. I just think Meyer and Shannon could beat them, and I think that's what they'll do.
Okay, and I'm gonna agree because, and this is another one I'm not so confident about because both teams are like the stock market, up down, up down. You don't know what you're gonna get sometimes, and when predicting in a tournament format, it's nearly impossible to feel confident. I'm gonna pick the Illini because I'm gonna bet on their superior talent to Northwestern over Northwestern's veteran boys, and maybe that's foolish, especially because I'm banking on Michigan State's veteran presence. But what I will say about Illinois is their talent is also very experienced between Meyer, Shannon, Coleman, Hawkins. And if they have Epps back to run the offense, maybe that gives them that extra gear that they didn't have against Purdue. And they didn't have, especially against Michigan, to really control that game, which they have the ability to do. So I'm going to go with the Fighting Illini as well, Sean.
All right, so we'll move down to the last quarterfinal here. That will be pretty late on Friday. For me, that'll be Indiana against Nebraska, and I'm going to say the Hoosiers are going to move on here, despite not being a great matchup for Nebraska. The third game in 3 days for the Cornhuskers, I think, is going to catch up to them a little bit, and Indiana being pretty fresh, having not played since Sunday. I'm going to go with the Hoosiers into the semifinals. So my semifinals are Michigan, Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana.
All right. And then I have Maryland versus Indiana. And I'm going to also pick the Hoosiers. One condition I would put on this, if this game takes place, I'm going to bet on Indiana's ability to hit jumpers, particularly 3-point shots against Maryland. I think Willard and Maryland defensively is very good. And when they played, correct me if I'm wrong, College Park, not only did Maryland win, they were frustrating Indiana a lot on offense.
Yeah,
right?
it was a tough game for Trace. I think he ended up getting 20, but he missed a lot of shots. They threw everything at him, and nobody made any threes.
Yeah, so I'm going to bet on that not happening again. I'm going to bet on Trace probably getting frustrated, probably scoring 20 as he always does, but having to needing the help of his teammates to make threes, and which is something we need. Sean really needs Indiana to do. Most Indiana fans would agree. They need to take him and hit him. That's very obvious, but
So the first semifinal for me, Michigan versus Iowa. I think the Hawkeyes are going to move on there. Now you got to be somewhere soon, Joe, so we'll try and finish this pretty quickly. I think Iowa is just going to score too much for Michigan. Third game in 3 days. So the Hawkeyes into the final for me.
okay. So this is where our main disagreement's going to be. So I have the all Michigan semifinal on Saturday. The last time that happened was 2018 at the Garden where Michigan won, and the exact opposite is going to happen. I think Michigan State is going to take advantage of the fact that Michigan had to play 2 games and both games which are do or die for Michigan. So I think that fatigue catches up with Michigan. I think they don't limit Dickinson, but they frustrate him to the point where he makes some bad cross court passes. I think Kobe Buckkin is going to be gassed at this point, and I think they exploit the fact that we can't really use our bench or have a reliable bench. And Michigan State wins this one, not handily, but controls the game for most of it to advance to Sunday of the Big Ten tournament.
So down to the other semifinal. That's Illinois and Indiana for the both of us. The Hoosiers won both games earlier in the year. They kind of handled Illinois on the road. Bryce Thompson was out that game for the Hoosiers. Didn't seem to matter, and then Indiana kind of stole one late at Assembly Hall against Illinois without Shannon. So tough to beat a team 3 times is the saying, although it's not entirely true. The stats say I think it's like over 80% where that team ends up winning anyway. But do the Hoosiers beat Illinois for the 3rd time this year, or did Illinois go to the finals? I'll let you lead this one off.
Oh, yeah, you're buying yourself more time for that because that's a hard question. I'm going to go with Indiana. It's not even the 80% stat. I just think Indiana, with this team, the best this team has been against Purdue. And seeing that, I feel like that has to come out, or parts of it have to come out again. And Illinois will go on runs. We saw this against Michigan and Purdue where they don't score, they don't have control, and Meyer will jack up some stupid shot. Probably doesn't go in.
Yeah, Meyer did make 5 threes in the first half against Indiana in Bloomington, and then he had 0 in the second half. So
yeah, so I think that will come back to bite Illinois. Indiana did suffer from that, but I'll bet on the sure scoring of Trace Jackson Davis. And Illinois, I don't know if they really have anyone who's as sure a scorer as Trace Jackson Davis on Indiana. So I'll pick the Hoosiers to face the Spartans in the final on Saturday.
yeah, I'm gonna agree with you. I think they have Illinois figured out. They won the game the second time despite not playing really well. I'm not exactly sure. I think Indiana fans will get up to Chicago, so it won't be some home court for Illinois. It might favor them a little bit, but neutral is just so much different than a true home, or a true Indy crowd when the Big Ten's in Indy. So I'm going to go with Indiana here. I would, as a Hoosiers fan, I would like to get Northwestern a 3rd time, just because I think they were fairly lucky to get both. Sort of like how Indiana beat Michigan both times. They probably should have at least lost one. But, yeah, I'm going to say Indiana's going to beat Illinois for the 3rd time this year. Trace is going to have a huge game, and a couple threes will be the difference for the Hoosiers at the end. So you've got Michigan State against the Hoosiers. I've got Iowa against the Hoosiers. I'll go first. The Hawkeyes swept the Hoosiers this year. Mike Woodson has never beaten the Hawkeyes in 2 years, and I'm going to say that is not going to change. The Hawkeyes are my Big Ten tournament champions. They lost to one of the worst teams in the conference at home on senior day, and I think they're going to kind of use that to their advantage. They have a little bit of a bench, too, which Indiana doesn't have, and that's going to make a difference Sunday afternoon in a game that will mean absolutely nothing for the seeding in the NCAA tournament.
Absolutely. I think all that would be on the line in either scenario, whether it's Iowa facing the Hoosiers or Michigan State facing the Hoosiers, is the presence of another banner in the respective arenas. So I'm going to go with Indiana also losing in the final, but to Michigan State. I'm not going to make a crazy claim that Michigan State's going to go to the Final Four. In fact, Michigan State's been to the second weekend one time in the past 7 seasons, which with Tom Izzo I find insane. But regardless, this gives me the vibe of a Michigan State team that's going to do something in March. I reserve the right to not say that's a Final Four or even Elite Eight, but no, it's a team that feels motivated, and a team that when they get hot, they have all the confidence in the world, and when they play good defense and with the veteran presence they have, that's something I'm going to keep going back to with Michigan State. You can't discount their experience. That's nothing. And me and Sean have watched basketball for a while, so most of our listeners, they would never discount experience, especially in these games in March. So I'm going to go with Michigan State winning 3 games in 3 days and lifting the trophy in Chicago, only to find out that they're probably a, what, 6 or 7 seed.
Yeah, so I threw the bracketology up for the YouTube listeners, Joe, while you were talking there. I have them as the second 7 seed. I actually have 3 Big Ten teams on that 7 line. Northwestern, 1 spot behind them, and Iowa, 1 spot behind them. I would think, other than maybe Michigan, who could play themselves into the field, I don't see any of these teams falling or going higher, one more seed than they're at. No, I think if Rutgers were to beat Michigan, then maybe they get to the 10, but not much can happen at this point for the shore tournament teams, which is everybody until Rutgers. Rutgers could probably lose and then sweat it out. I still think they're okay unless, Florida Atlantic loses. Charleston's in their championship game tonight. They're probably worse off than Rutgers if they lose that, but Mountain West, as long as there's no bid stealers there, I think you're okay if you're Rutgers either way, but the Big Ten tournament, somebody has to win it. I don't think any team has really shown the ability to win 3 or 4 games in that many days, but somebody's got to do it. So thanks for tuning in to this special edition of the Big Ten Report, presented by the Sports Daily Media Network, your one-stop shop for all things sports. Check out the Instagram page. We'll throw our teams up there and the bracketology as soon as we're done here. And not sure when we'll see you next. At the latest, it'll be Selection Sunday, just minutes after the bracket is released. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.